Yeah. Ah.
Deep grounding breath.
Well, I don't own a pair of shoes, so I'm pretty grounded most of the time. Yeah. What drew me to connect with you was, although I haven't watched a lot of your material, I work on energy, on feeling. And for me, I'm just overjoyed to be connecting with somebody that seems to be vibrating at the same frequency that I am.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate your connection. Yeah.
And so, as I spent my life, well, this is my, how old am I now? This is my 58th year as a paid stage performer. But as a folk singer, I never wrote a song list. I always went on the energy, and so I don't know how long this conversation will last. And Zoom might kick us off after half an hour, but if we're still in the flow of things, I'll just reissue the link so that we can carry on. So time is not an issue. And yeah, so I suppose getting all formal and proper and grown up, for the benefit of our future listeners, g'day folks, and welcome to my channel. I'm glad you were drawn here to view what's about to unfold in a loving way. And I'm really, really pleased to connect with Alena. And what I feel is the topic and the kickoff phrase is Alena, from what I can gather, is working on and with self-love, loving yourself. And that really resonates with me. Now, me as a spiritual mechanic, my phrasing of that is believing in oneself. So here we have Alena with self-love, and here you have Bob with self-belief. And so what I would like to do is explore how loving myself has brought me out of trauma and absolute victimhood to a place of contentment. And then I would love for Alena to share a little bit about herself and how she uses self-love to achieve. Look at that beautiful face and that beautiful smile, and you just radiate contentment. So it's really easy. So for me, where I am now, I'm 70 years old. Well, I'm 70 years old this year. It took me 20 years to remove 40 years of programming. I had my first panic attack back in 1984, which was when I began my own healing journey, although I didn't realize it because I was in the depths of what is the lie that's commonly known as depression. It's an illness and you will have it forever, and it's a life.
Yeah, so it's in your genes, nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and all that bullshit. And where I am now, having done the work, and it's not over. The hero's journey never ends for me. I know it's a journey, not a destination. But where I am now, there are 3 guiding words that are like my signposts in my life. And the first one is integrity. Now, for me, without personal integrity, the magic just, there's no way it could happen. Because if I can lie to myself, then I can lie to anybody. So becoming totally and brutally honest with myself was an essential challenge. for me to actually grow. And then the second word in my life, the second signpost in my life is KISS. The KISS principle. Keep it simple, sovereign. And I reckon the universe operates under that principle. Because the only time my life gets complicated is when my mind crawls back into the driving seat. And all I have to do is reach in, throw it out, and put my heart back in the driving seat, and my life becomes simple again. And then the third word is SUE. I call this my SUE principle, SUE. And that is all are sovereign, unique, and equal. And everything else just flows from that. And so, as a sovereign, unique, and equal being, and I take full responsibility for this life that I do create, there is no argument, only difference. So vive la difference, which is the end of all argument. So that's where I'm at. And with self-love, that was destroyed in my childhood. That was destroyed in my childhood. And you've only got to look at a little toddler wandering around, you know, the world's magical, and hello, you know, tottering around, that beautiful innocence that I was born with. But through a traumatic childhood, that magic was beaten out of me. I had a very violent childhood. And the message that I internalized then was, Mum's always beating me, therefore she does not love me, therefore I'm unlovable and it's all my fault. And then the second message was, and the world's a dangerous place, you know? Yeah, which explains. So during those years from probably 2 to 7 or 8, around about that time, home for me was living in fight and flight. You know, so I was always anxious because I didn't know when I was going to get beaten again. And it wasn't until many years later that I actually reclaimed that. So again, repeating Sue, as we're all sovereign, unique, and equal, all I can do is share what works for me in my own journey, and in the hope that it will resonate with other people, you know, because it's hard for me to imagine any child in any Western society that's grown up and had all their emotional and spiritual needs met. I just feel very strongly that
it's impossible.
For every child, all it takes is one moment of terror, that look of terror in the child's eyes, and then the trust between child and parent is broken. But thankfully, with the help of John Bradshaw, he saved my life. I actually went back and healed my childhood wounds and worked through my stuff with my abusers, mum and dad. And yeah, and my healing wasn't complete until I was able to forgive my abusers. And so now here I am, and I'm content with me, and I'm thinking about, my life is so awesome, I just want it to go on forever. But why am I still poisoning myself? That's the question I ask with me. I've done a lot of work on addictions. I was addicted to antidepressants for over 20 years, more like 25. So I managed to throw them away, and I don't take any pharmaceuticals. And the question that's bothering me at the moment is, if I can get rid of those, why do I still have addictions? And my primary addictions are to tobacco, and alcohol, you know. So, but even with all that, I'm content with me. You know, like I smoke too much, I drink too much, I exercise about as much as a koala bear, but I am content. Compared to where I was 20 years ago, I am absolutely blissed out. And so, do I put any more energy into trying to remove these final addictions, or just accept my current level of contentment? Anyway, that's enough about me and my
Well,
what
that's a
strikes me
fascinating
about
story of
self-love.
your.
Yeah, what strikes me about self-love, if I look at self-love and self-belief, for me they're just two sides of the same coin, and the coin I would call emotional or spiritual currency.
Well,
Anyway, I'll shut
this
up
is
now.
this is fascinating approach of yours, Bob. Emotional spiritual currency. That's interesting. I've never thought about this way, but you're right. Self-love and self-belief goes hand to hand. You can't have enough one without other. Now, isn't it? So yeah, this has to be, well, I don't want to say fixed, but if you don't love yourself, how can you believe in yourself? You'll be always not enough, not good enough, not worthy, not lovable, and so on and so forth. And from this place of not being enough, you build your life, you build your relationship, make all these choices in life that basically not necessarily serve your highest good. And yes, you're right. When I was listening to a story, I could relate 100% of myself. Thankfully, I didn't have that much of abuse in my childhood, but I was born in a family of survivors, literal survivors. From, my dad was a prisoner, or prisoner who do say, the person who was sent to, Gulag for 10 years with pretty much without valid reasons for that. And my mom family was also persecuted. They were forced to move from their village, in rural region to the Kazakhstan, just because they happened to have one cow, and they were wealthy enough to have a hired work in the summer. That was enough to render them, enemy, and someone who didn't deserve and doesn't belong to the working class need to be punished, robbed. So it was survival all the time. And I didn't know, basically, not only I took this in myself by osmosis, all these vibes, that life is hard, you need to work hard, and you're always danger, and you have to be a certain way to fit in the society, not to be hurt again. But also the way my parents were raised. They themselves never had a unconditional love, and you know this story, right? So
Yeah.
I never had a open expression of love myself. I didn't know what it is. And as I learned recently due to the hypnosis sessions and stuff, that I was physically abused from the early days of my life, just because I was crying nonstop. I probably had some issues with the digestion, because my mom couldn't breastfeed me, basically. And yeah, that happens. All this kind of upbringings results in a close of your heart. because you don't know what love is, and you have to walk around on the eggshell to please your parents. So you're not gonna be scolded, you're not gonna be, spanked and shamed and guilt. Oh, yeah. It's not that I'm not saying that my parents were bad people, absolutely not. I love them and admire them for what they've been through and what they gave us, to me and my sister, what kind of life, what kind of education and everything. But looking back, oh my gosh, I wish I had something different. But again, what do you know? I wouldn't be in the place I am now if not this, traumas that I acquired through my life.
Do you mind if I
Starting at
respond, Alena?
Sorry, say it again.
Do you mind if I respond to what you've just shared?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, similar journey, sister. In the early 90s, I started doing the inner child work and sitting back in that childhood space. I got to the stage where it's, God, I hate you, Mum. I bloody hate you. Why do you always beat me? But then there was the other side of the argument was, but you got to love your mum. You've only got one mum. So there was this dichotomy that was tearing my soul apart. And so I sat down and wrote the letter to Mum. This is around about 2000 by the time I actually got the courage to do it. And I just wrote, Dear Mum, just writing to tell you how I felt as a child growing up in our family. This is not about blame. This is just telling you my story. Please tell me your story. So I got the notepad out, and I started writing. What I thought would be 2 or 3 pages ended up being like the War and Peace. It was that thick. I hated it when you beat me with the carpet sweeper. I hated it when you dangled me by my wrist and hit me with the rolling pin. I hated it when you blamed me for the scar on your belly, and just all of these old wounds and I just got it out on paper and wrote it down, and God, I was exhausted at the end of that. And I just reiterated, Mum, this is not about blame. This is just about telling you my story. Please tell me yours. So at that time and I still am living in Australia, and Mum was living in England. And the hardest thing I did then was I actually posted that letter to Mum back in England. Now, eventually I got a reply from Mum saying, oh, Bobby, you must think I'm the best mother in the whole world, but I was only doing my very best. And so I wrote back to Mum and said, Mum, this is not about blame. Tell me your story. So eventually, probably about 6 months later, Mum wrote back, and Mum was born in Germany in 1924 between the wars. Dad was an alcoholic and Mum was a control freak. Her cousins were in the SS or they were shot. And basically, she had a really traumatic and abusive childhood too. And that's when the light bulb went off. Through Mum sharing her story, I realized that, yes, Mum was doing her very, very best. But all she could do was dump on me what got dumped on her. So by writing that letter, I'd actually broken the multi-generational cycle of abuse. And then I managed to phone Mum a few days later, and she was back in hospital with a second incident of bowel cancer, 20 years apart. And that was the first time we spoke as mother and son, as 2 adults. Tears are streaming. And then 3 days later, she died. And I thought, well, what a wonderful closure. But it was like,
yes,
somebody had taken an elephant off my shoulders. But there's still a niggle here. There's still a niggle. What's this niggle? Right, Dad, you bastard. So I sat down and wrote a similar letter to Dad. Now, Dad was a mythical creature because he was always at work doing what dads did, bringing home the bacon. So he went to work before I got up, and he came home after I was back in bed. And so the message I got from Dad was, Dad never spends any time with me. Therefore, he does not love me. Therefore, I'm unlovable, and it's all my fault. So I wrote a letter to Dad, and he died. I didn't know where, but I knew he was dead. And just wrote down, why didn't you come to school sports days? Why didn't you take me fishing? Why didn't you spend any time with me, and then just put it in an envelope and signed it to Dad in heaven and then burnt it. And that, for me, is how I healed the wounds of my childhood and was able to forgive my abusers. That realization that we're all victims of victims, and if you don't hand it back, you pass it on.
Oh gosh.
And so that was my moment of liberation, really. Okay.
This is an incredibly powerful story. Yeah, this is amazing. So are you saying that writing these two letters allowed you to heal all your childhood traumas? That's it?
Yeah.
Wow. It's really cathartic. So Bob, tell me, how did you raise your own children? You do have a child, right?
My family, I had my first panic attack in 1984, and I've been married for a while, since about 76. So I have one son and a stepdaughter. When we came to Australia, hang on, let's get this. So I started taking antidepressants in 1984. And every antidepressant I took turned me into a different person, and none of them which I liked. So trying to start a new life, I decided, with agreement with my wife, that we would emigrate to Australia. But I didn't realize that all we were doing was doing a geographical. Now, we've been married for many years, and we were never honest with each other. We were like the magazine couple, the magazine family. We were always polite to each other, but nobody ever shared the truth. And when we came to Australia, and the 6 months before that, we started to snap at each other and disrespect each other, and and I realized, and Pam did as well, once we got to Australia, that our marriage was shallow. We weren't living our truth. We were living the role that was expected of us by society. We both had great jobs. I had a great job in automotive research. We had a 2-story detached house, holidays in the south of France. We ticked all the boxes for the matrix, for the magazine life. But it was all bullshit. It was all bullshit because neither of us, during the time we were together, shared our heart-centered truth. So when we emigrated to Australia in November '89, I knew in my heart this is where I needed to be. This is my homeland. But Pam didn't feel at home. So after a couple of months, we decided, and thankfully, we decided before our domestic situation became violent, because you could see the writing on the wall, the way things were going, the start of the disrespect and the ego and all that shit. So in about February 19, I said, I'm staying, I've got to, but if you don't want to stay, that's okay too. So let's divide up the spoils, what we've created between us, and you take what you want and you go and follow your dream, and I've got to stay and follow my dream. And I must have cried. I must have cried for about.
Yeah.
G'day, mate. I must have cried for about 6 months. You know, coming home to a new home in Australia, and Pam's not there, and Jamie's not there, and Emma's not there. But I knew in my heart of hearts this is where I needed to be. Now, Pam went back to England, and with her sister-in-law, they bought a bed and breakfast place on the coast in England. So they had a home that had an income, and Pam got back into her own business, and she's done an amazing job of raising the kids. They've always known where I am, and it was sad that the contact didn't last very long, but it takes two to tango. You know, I can't. But the funny thing is, like when this happened, Jamie was about 6. And that's the same age that I was when my dad abandoned me and committed himself to a mental institution in England. So it's like history repeating itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But I'd met some good friends in the folk music scene in Western Australia, and they were just amazing. So, and then I just realised that Pam and I, all we'd done, we brought our baggage with us. We'd just done a geographical, but by making that break, however painful, I knew that this is the land that I was meant to be. And I don't own a pair of shoes, Alena, and I walk this land.
Whatsoever. Oh my goodness, I thought it's a joke.
Oh, no. And as a folk singer, I got a job in automotive research in Western Australia because I've got an amazing intellect, and that's what I was doing in the UK. And so my mind was having a ball, but my spirit was dying. It was still dying, and I was still hooked on these antidepressants. So I went to my boss one day and said, Chris, I fear if I lose this job, I'll die, so I quit. And I'd been there nearly 10 years. And Chris knew about my state of dis-ease, this lie that's called depression. And he said, Bob, I kind of get that. So I quit my job. I was playing at Araluen Festival, and there was a Volkswagen Combi for sale there. So I bought it for $3,000, put a pop top on, brought it back home, put a pop top on, fitted it out for the traveling life, sold my house. I had a three garage detached house with a swimming pool, sold everything or gave away whatever wouldn't fit in the combi. And the first thing that wouldn't fit in the combi was the television, the TV. So I haven't had a television since 1995. And so I set off in Australia. I was earning real good money in automotive research. And from the sale of the house, I realised about $30,000 Australian. And so I set off around Australia, playing at music festivals all around the country. And the first tour, the money I had, we're running out of time, so I'll restart the.
All right, there we go.
Yeah. Self-love. When did you discover how important it was, and how do you use it in your life?
Oh my gosh. You'll be laughing, Bob, but I discovered that I'm not loving myself relatively late, like, I don't know, a year ago, maybe less, like totally realized that I have issues in this department. Because before that, I was just, living my life and doing my things as a wife, as a scientist. I'm a scientist, by the way, biologist with PhD and stuff. Raising a family, we immigrated to the United States 20 plus years ago from my home country of Belarus. It was no time to even to stop, to relax, to do some inner inquiry. What I'm doing? Should I do this? Should I? It was just like in one trench, basically. It was battle, survival, you know. I'm just playing scenarios of my family, of my, you know, ancestral lineage, because it's all programmed. We come to this world pre-programmed, preloaded with all kind of issues, not to mention the traumas that we receive early in life or even before the birth in uterus. It's a huge time to, you know, also accommodate all kind of traumas and programming. So the thing is that despite my very analytical, very kind of left brain mind, I had always, as far as I remember myself, very sharp interest, very strong interest in natural healing. Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
That's Charlie.
Like,
that's Charlie.
Hey, nice to meet you. So my science career, the reason why I chose biology partially is because it was the closest one to my primary interest in, you know, natural healing of what's the right fruits and vegetables to eat, what kind of vitamins, minerals, this and that we can find in our, you know, food. This kind of things. Psychology was a big, high interest for me, to the point that I was contemplating career in this in psychology, but thankfully I couldn't get into.
Good on you, darling. Good on you.
Well, anyway. So this kind of secret life of mine were peacefully coexisted with my official, very successful, mind you, scientific career, biomedical research. So at one side, and I was looking for all kinds of metaphysicals, starting 2008. I got into Reiki, got into different energy treatments, modalities. All of this together with doing hardcore, you know, science, studying skin biology, studying neuroscience, cancer research. That was my last project. Oh my gosh. Killing all these rodents all the time for the sake of science and pharmaceutical industry, because all of scientific research, at least related to biomedical research, it's all the only purpose of it to serve pharma, big pharma, nothing else.
Yeah.
you have to choose one good disease that is under, you know, under researched, and there is a big demand in society to cure this and that. And then it's the only way to get funding. Nothing else will work. But anyway, at some point, I got to the point, to the time in my life that I basically, I had to have a choice. What it's just the, you know, the level of frequency that I acquired like 2 years ago. Well, anyway, during this COVID time, it was so incompatible with what I'm doing and what I was working for money. So when my institution where I worked at the time, huge medical center that our college was affiliated with, was part of it, introduced the mandates for, you know what, it wasn't even basically a choice, because I knew I couldn't do it. It was so against all my instincts, against everything that I believe in, believed, and So I got myself fired at some point, and it was very traumatic. I'm not gonna lie. It was like it was big relief and everything. No, it was tough because a huge part of my identity went into the drain. It was lots of grieving. It was such a huge trigger that some, you know, it was kind of earthquake for me, tsunami of everything, and all this darkness, all this grief, all this pain, all this hurt that I accumulated for my lifetime. I was purging for the 2 weeks or so after I left my job. So it was tough. It was really, really hard. And I balanced myself. I managed, and I'm so grateful to our course community. Mark Edward course. It was amazing brotherhood, camaraderie, sisterhood, brotherhood. It was such a blessing. It was. I don't have enough words to describe how much support and love and understanding and, again, support, triple support I've got just to insert myself as a healer, because every time that I was contemplating, should I do this or that, like semi-professionally, because despite all my work, all my interests in alternative healing, like holistic approaches, there's always on the back of my mind, imposter issue. Who am I to do it? Me, insignificant. I'm not qualified. I can do it. It took, I don't know how many months to truly believe in myself. Thank you, Bob, for this coin of yours. Self-love and self-belief. It's one doesn't exist without other. So basically, it's only recently after I was brought into this situation to start all over again, to reset my life in a new capacity, in a new level, that I understood, like completely realized that, oh my God, I need to work on this. It's just such an impediment, such a break in my progress as a person, as a, let's say free spirit, but we all definitely have issues with over programming, with mind control. And the best way to mind control people is to plunge into trauma, don't you think? This is how it was developed. So it's not a coincidence that every single one in our realm has a big, it's not even one trauma, it's a complex of all kind of trauma you can imagine. And it doesn't have to be like a real sexual or violent aggression or abuse, just tiny little tweaks of not getting enough, of cutting off, and how it is, attachment trauma, developmental traumas, and that's enough to screw us up for a long time. So I'm still working on my traumas bit by bit, one at a time. I have tremendous support and mentor, Lorraine Ham, who's also in our group, in our channel. So we have a kind of reciprocity-based self-healing team. I help her, she helps me, and it's really, really synergistic and fruitful, should I say. So this is, in brief, my story and my traumas, and how I finally going to the place of starting to love myself as we all need to.
Yeah. Do you mind if I respond, Alena?
Sure.
You do mind?
No, go for it.
That's one thing that I've learned. That's one thing that I've learned since I For me, my heart is my only compass and my inner intuition is my only guide. And for me, my words are my spells, so I do cast them wisely. For the universe is always listening and takes everything I say literally, literally. So I've spent the last 20 years retraining how I use the power of my spells, the power of words. And what I've come to realize is that the mind, my mind is just a tool that I use when I choose, for I'm so much more than my mind. But my mind is always looking for answers, but my heart already knows. And so I consciously moved from head space to heart space. So I live in my heart now. I honor my mind. I treat it like I treat my little puppy dog. I have to exercise it and keep it well and healthy. But I treat it like my little puppy dog. I say, hello, mind. Can you go off and do some research into sonoluminescence or whatever? And come back and report to me. So off it goes, wagging its little tail because it's had some attention from the master. And it comes back, reports to me, and I pat it on the head and give it a treat and say, good boy, thank you very much, mind. Now back in your basket, I'll take you for another run tomorrow. And I've come to realize that my body is so much smarter than me. My body always knows what it needs. And all I have to do is listen and obey. So now, if I have an area of pain in my body, 20 years ago, I'd have reached for a painkiller. Now I sit with that, like the pain of depression. I sat with the pain of depression. But if there's a pain in my life now, I'll sit with that. Where is it? Where is it? What's going on here? So I'll do the research and find out what the cause is. Our whole Western medical system is aimed at just placating the system, the symptoms. Because they'd be all out of business if any of them could provide a cure, and they don't want a cure, they want customers. And that was another realization. Like the mental health business is a $1 trillion business. The same with the pharmaceutical industry. Now, what I've come to realize is, and if I disappear from the planet, it's because Big Pharma has found out I'm out to get them, you know. Because it's all bullshit. It's all, you know, it's just a bloody big lie. I'll take an example, PTSD. For me, the biggest wound of the soul would be for me to be sent to a foreign country to kill, maim, or murder somebody that looks like me. If I carried that out, that's going to be the biggest soul wound that I can imagine. And yet our society has been programming men, especially for thousands of years, that it is honorable to go and do just that thing. And so these programmed robots go to other countries and carry out this heinous sin, and they come back home, and the wound of their soul manifests in the physical realm as the symptoms of PTSD.
Yeah.
And so instead of, and their government that programmed them and sent them there drops them like a, you know, hot brick. You know, they don't need medication. They were already medicated before they were sent. The armed forces are the first groups of people that try out new antidepressants to cut them off.
Antidepressants.
Yeah, to cut them off from their feeling self. Now, for me, feelings are healings. And it was through feeling that I healed myself. I couldn't think my way out. And I don't know of anybody that's died from expressing their feelings, but I know hundreds that die from suppressing their feelings.
Yes.
So now I just express my feelings in the moment. Depends where you are, you know. You got to be careful with this. Otherwise, they'll lock you up and throw you in the loony bin. But feelings are healings for me. And it just comes back to the KISS principle. You know, for me, thinking is the language of the mind, but feeling is the language of the soul. And I healed my depression when I was out on my boat by just allowing all those trapped feelings that I wasn't allowed to express during the terror of my childhood. I just allowed them to come out. I shouted and screamed and ranted, and I must have slept for days and days and days, but I just allowed what was ever trapped within my subconscious from the, you know, my painful childhood,
Yes.
to vomit out. And I was so exhausted because emotions, energy, emotional work takes a lot of energy. Emotion, emotion, energy in motion. So which is why a lot of people just like to stay locked into the mind, looking for scientific solutions. Now, the day science can explain consciousness is the day the game's all over, because science is just a construct of creation. So it never can. And Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, not my garden, I haven't seen them in there yet. They got kicked out of the Garden of Eden for eating from the tree of knowledge, which just says to me that the pursuit of knowledge is the original sin. Now, within the silence of my heart, I found a place I call my knowing. And my knowing has no words. But it is through that place, that silent place in my heart, that I connect to source. And I connect to what I call the universal library that of all that there is to know. People call it the Akashic record. But there's no out there. It's, I found all my solutions within my heart. Oh, yeah, that was pretty deep.
This is very deep, very deep. Thanks. So I'm curious, Bob. Do you have any secret? How can you switch off your mind to drop in your heart and stay there until further notice and request some doing some researches?
I'll share.
Tell me.
I'll share with you how I did it. It was when I started my comedy trip and reading Shakti Gawain, creative visualization, and I work with pictures or videos in here, well, on the back of here, you know. And so I created this video of me running down this underground tunnel with the fluorescent lights, you know, down, 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 a bit like a scene in a James Bond movie, you know, down, down. And I came to the end of the tunnel, and there was this huge sliding glass door. As I approached the door, it slid open, and I entered the computer room of my mind.
Wow.
And I could hear the dark satanic hum of the spinning hard drives. And over on the right-hand wall, there was a big red switch. So I amble over to the big red switch, and somebody had posted a notice on there: beware, thinking can seriously damage your well-being. I thought, yeah, right there, mate. So what I did in my mind's eye was I grabbed hold of that big red switch and went kerclunk and turned the switch off. And then I could hear the hard drives of my mind, my computer mind, spinning down, spinning down. Now, I played that in a video over and over and over and over again until that realization came out that my mind is just a tool that I use when I choose, for I am so much more than my mind. And then that
That's for
me
sure.
on to treating my mind, because it's a tool that I value in my spiritual toolbox. But that's what led me to treating my mind like I treat my puppy dog. Now, my mind doesn't drive my life. I do. I am that I am, and I am content. It is the I am that drives my life.
Wonderful.
Right?
So did you make this video yourself, or you use somebody else's visualization?
No, I created it I closed my eyes and just
Oh, so it was like mental
created
image.
it on the inside of my skull.
Mhm.
That's my own movie screen.
I see.
Mm.
Awesome. Maybe I should try something else, because I really looping in my mind way too often. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, well, I would recommend you look at Ian Lungold and his work on the Mayan calendar and the evolution of consciousness. And I can send you some links if you're interested, because his
Sure.
information turned my life around. And if you can send me the links to your work and what you're doing, I will compile these two Zoom meetings into one, and then do the monetize SEO thing and put it out there. Because what, in summary, what's happened for me today is I've just witnessed two beautiful hearts sharing their innermost, and that takes courage. But as Shakespeare said, above all, be true to thine own self. Because without that,
Yeah.
What are you? I speak my truth now, my heart-centered truth. And if people have a reaction to that, well, all I'm doing is sharing data. If somebody has an emotional reaction to that, well, that's their responsibility, not mine. I'm not here to say things to make you feel warm and fuzzy. I'm just here to share my truth. You got a problem with that? It's your bloody problem. Hey?
Sure. Okay. I have no problem with you, Bob, and with your truth. Yeah, and that was a really enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I've heard it before, at least fragments of this from your other videos, but every time I hear it, it's incredible. This journey is really hero's journey, no less.
Yeah. And
Good
what I
for you.
love about it is everybody is on their own hero's journey. And this is not
Indeed.
we are not the human race, because that implies competition. I compete with no one. We're
This
all,
is so true.
and we're all human beings, and just simply being requires neither thinking or doing. Hey.
That's a good point, Bob. Indeed.
And it feels like it's about right to close now.
Yes. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you.
Let's do it again.
Space and vibes. Yeah.
Because there's nothing more real than becoming real again, is there?
Yes, indeed.
Bye for now, darling.
Have a good day, Bob, and see you sometime soon.
I create my life, which is why it's so awesome.
It is.
Bye.
Bye-bye.